We're going to continue with money, power, politics. And if you didn't guess it, you don't watch this show. Talking about the latest casualty in the escalating Trump-Musk battle royale. Tesla shares dropped 14%, with the company losing $152 billion in market cap after the president threatened to pull government contracts from Musk's companies. Joining me to discuss, Ron Insana, CNBC senior analyst and veteran Washington correspondent John Harwood. He's a distinguished fellow at Duke University and a columnist for Zateo on Substack. John, here's what didn't add up for me today. Elon Musk went absolute scorched earth on Donald Trump, invoking Jeffrey Epstein, impeachment, recession, right? A devastating trifecta, some of which not even remotely rooted in any fact that we're aware of. Yet Donald Trump didn't go scorched earth back. And remember, that's what he's famous for. Melania Trump, once said, "My husband's not a bully, but if you hit him, he'll hit you twice as hard." Trump's response was, Elon Musk really liked working here. I bet he'll want to come back. And then he threatened to pull government contracts. That doesn't seem like Trump hit him back twice as hard. Does it seem that way to you?
Well, I think cutting government contracts would be a pretty big hit if he actually was serious about that and followed through. But I also think that Donald Trump knows that it's not in his interest for this to blow up any further. And so I think he also may have some vulnerability on the Epstein front. Who knows? But I think Elon Musk recognizes that his time in Washington damaged him in a significant way in terms of his broader public image, in terms of the image of his company. Now the legislation that they're moving may take away tax credits that they value. So there are a variety of ways where he's limping out of Washington and not in a good mood. His personal life is also in an erratic kind of state. So I think he's more likely to lash out and escalate it. And I think Donald Trump knows that Elon Musk can make trouble with him, with his coalition. And so he's trying to tamp this down. It's not like going after an individual member of Congress. You're talking about somebody with a huge social media audience who's developed a lot of credibility with the MAGA movement and a ton of money as well.
Ron, what were your biggest takeaways?
Where you're going later in the show, I think, is one of the things I'm most concerned about. I mean, I know, Elon Musk suffered a loss of some money today. He's still worth in the neighborhood of $380 billion. So we're not going to shed a lot of tears for, whatever dollars he happened to burn in taking on the president. But when you look at Tesla, when you look at SpaceX, when you look at X and Grok, which is an artificial intelligence business that he's started, when you look at Starlink, you have all these different aspects of his business world that are deeply interconnected with the government. It depends. He could lose his contracts, or as he at one juncture warned earlier today, he could cut off access to some of these very important businesses that assist the U.S. government, both economically and from a geopolitical perspective. So that's really more what I've been keying in on. I mean, obviously, the markets tonight, the futures are basically up as far as the stock market is concerned. Bond market's not doing anything. There's been precious little response, except for the minor downdraft we got this afternoon on Wall Street to what's going on in Washington, which is surprising because this is larger than just, the way it's being handled on social media as some sort of Real Housewives spat, as opposed to something that has real life consequences, for many Americans and for the functioning of the U.S. government.
But let's stay on one of those points, because Elon Musk says he is going to decommission his SpaceX Dragon spacecraft immediately. John, how big a deal is that?
Well, it is a big deal under current circumstances if he were to do that. He's got a lot of, as Ron indicated, he's got a lot of control over aspects of the U.S. space program, as well as the U.S. military, which depends on the satellites he puts up in the air. But one thing I think we also can't dismiss the possibility of is, while Trump is threatening his contracts, Donald Trump is somebody who has shown he would go way beyond what anyone thought the bounds of the law would be. Some people in the defense industry have thought that Musk's role is privatized in a way that is not in the interest of the United States. So it's not beyond the pale that somebody like Donald Trump could initiate some sort of effort to nationalize those companies. I'm not predicting that or anything, but Donald Trump has jumped the shark in many ways in his battle against Harvard and other aspects of the early months of his presidency, and I wouldn't put it past him to try to make some more serious trouble for Musk companies.